my people, how you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. I'll be showing you guys how you can replicate and recreate Luis Enrique's 4-3-3 formation, as well as the defensive structure and setup that you can use in order to replicate PSG's realistic tactics in the game FC24. Of course, if you do like that video, or this video I should say, hit that like button. That's the most important thing. That'd be fantastic. I'd love you till forever. And also, we are on the road to 3,000 subs before the end of the year. I'd like to see if we can potentially get there. I think we can. So if you guys would like to and you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean the absolute world to me going forward. Now let's hop on into it. With the formation going forward, it's just a 4-3-3 holding. No real changes have been made. So it's one goalkeeper, two centre backs, two fullbacks, one DM, two central midfielders, one striker, and then two wingers. Now with the tactics going forward, I think that the tactical vision should be set to wing play, as it does allow you to implement everything, including the defensive structure and how you want the tactics to be set out. It incorporates everything that you would need, so that's why I've gone with it to be set to wing play. The defensive style for the normal balanced approach is going to be set to pressure on heavy touch, so more or less trying to keep their structure, keep their shape, and look for the opposition to try and make a mistake, and then in order for Kylian Mbappe and Dembele and so on to try and pounce on that mistake and then try and transition it into an attacking phase of play. For the team width, it is set to 55, which is slightly wider than the usual set of tactics that we do try and deliver. Normally we go for a very compact system, and most coaches tend to do this, but with PSG it's a very widespread system, mainly trying to prevent those crosses from being whipped into the box. So obviously you will have a bit more space between the lines for the opposition to try and play through, so you have to bear with that. But of course you do have a decent backline. I mean, an 87 overall Marquinhos, and you can pair him alongside the likes of Kimpembe or whoever you want, really, and they can more or less try and deal with those attempted through ball passes, as well as your midfield is very combative and will also look to try and prevent that going forward. The depth is set to 85, a very high line, looking to try and pin the opposition in their own half at times, looking to try and exert as much pressure on the opposition with the relentless offensive outlet that you will look to try and deploy. But again, it does also help with the offside approach as well, trying to catch the opposition out with the offside traps. So you also need to be a bit wary, a bit careful of it. I would suggest maybe dropping it slightly deeper if you are playing a team that's obviously got a few faster players. If you're playing the likes of an Aston Villa, for example, who's got the likes of Ollie Watkins and Diaby, or a Real Madrid with Vinicius and Rodrigo. So you do need to be a bit more cautious. But nonetheless, I do think that a nice 85 does more or less replicate and reflect a realistic PSG approach going forward. Of course, guys, by the way, I have replicated PSG's tactics before. The 3-3-1 formation. It is something that I quite liked at the time. So if you haven't seen that, I will link it at the end of this video right here. Go check it out. Hit the like button on that one too as well. I would absolutely appreciate it. Now moving on to the offense, I've gone with a balanced approach for the builder play. I think they like to try and incorporate a bit of everything, whether it's a long ball from back to front or potentially that fast-paced build up going forward. They will look to try and, you know, switch it up a bit depending on the opposition, of course. So yes, they do look to try and have a bit more of a dynamic approach going forward. The chance creation is its forward runs, and this does open a lot of space between the lines for your players to try and get in between. Obviously with the movements, the pace and the power that your front line does possess, it does work into their favor more times than not, and you will be presented with a lot of goal scoring opportunities. The width is set to 90. Now I did note that they do try and work the ball into those wide areas quite a bit, and this opens up a lot of space in the midfield, as well as for your attackers to try and, you know, work with and work into, by drawing the opposition into those wider regions of the field with the sheer overabundance of your players loaded into those wide areas. I mean, it will be your fullback, your whichever sided midfielder it is, and then of course your winger in those wider regions, looking to try and facilitate the play and then work it either into the central areas of the box or potentially try and attack down either flank. As for the players in the box, however, they do try and overload the opposition with the sheer numbers that they try and put into the box, whether it's you know, Mbappe, Dembele, and Kolo Muani, or if they are playing a front four system, they try and get all four forwards into those attacking areas. So they do have a high number, which is why I've set it to 8. And this is also good for cutback opportunities. You will see in the gameplay that I did score a few cutback opportunities, as well as, you know, for the crossing opportunities that will be presented to your winger or potentially your fullback. Whoever's crossing it, they'll have a good number of targets to try and hit in the box. As for corners and free kicks, as always, I have set it to 4. Now, starting off with the instructions with the goalkeeper, the likes of Donnarumma, he is set to come for crosses and have a balanced approach for his saving, so he's not going to be the modernized sweeper keeper. I don't think he's really ever been that. I may have explained this in the previous PSG video, but I just think I find it more comfortable and more realistic to have him set to a balanced set of instructions. And then, of course, he is quite tall, quite physical, can claim those aerial balls that are whipped into the box, whether it's a cross or a corner or a free kick, you name it, he's going to claim it. So more times than not, he's going to do that very aggressively. As for your 2 centre-backs, I've gone with Kimpembe and Marquinhos. Of course, you can switch it up depending on how you like it. I know some people will play the likes of Hernandez as a centre-back, but I've gone with him as the left-back for the situation. But as for the 2 centre-backs, they are set to their base set of instructions, with our full-backs being set to a slightly differing role for the both of them. The likes of Hernandez, Lucas Hernandez, he is set to join the attack as well as overlap, and then his defensive positioning is set to stick to position, and this does have a lot to do with what the likes of Kylian Mbappe will try and do, having a bit more of a freer, more attacking role going forward. The likes of Hakimi, of course, the more natural, talented attacking fullback of the 2, and of course when Nuno Mendes comes in, his instructions look a lot more similar to the likes of Hakimi, but we will get there soon enough. But talking about Hakimi, he's set to join the attack and have a run type set to mix. Now, you do want him to be able to provide those overlapping runs at times, or potentially the inverted runs, potentially opening up a bit more space either for your wingers or potentially for your midfield or your attackers going forward. So either way, he's going to either supply a nice whipped in cross or potentially a cutback opportunity. I know I am saying potentially quite a bit, I do apologize. And then his defensive position is set to step up. You want him to be a bit more aggressive and imposing on this right-hand side. Of course, he will also have the likes of Dembele occasionally helping him back on defense, so you can afford for him to be a bit more, wayward with his positioning sense. Whereas the likes of Mbappe, you don't really want him coming back because it's not very realistic. Moving on into the midfield though, Ugarte. Now, I've been testing this out and I think it kind of works. I think from FIFA it didn't really work, but I think with EA it slightly does. So for Ugarte, you obviously are trying to create this menacing, physical, aggressive natured CDM, right? And in order to do that, I've gone with tight marking. So whoever is the potential striker or the number 10, they're going to more or less try and be taken out of the game by this DM right here. His attacking support is set to stay back while attacking, not always looking to get that far forward, but when he does, he can unleash a few shots from outside the box, testing the opposition goalkeeper from time to time. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on, and this is to try and replicate his aggressive nature in the game. And then for his positioning freedom, I've gone with stick to position. You don't really need him being the deep lying playmaker, taking the ball off the back line. That's what your other midfielders are for. The number 8s in this team, they will be able to do that more effectively as well. And then for his defensive position, I've gone with cover center. You don't really also want him drifting into those wider channels looking to, take up those spaces. You want him to more or less try and shield the back line as best as he can and more or less be a thorn in the opposition side. Now, moving slightly higher up the field to the likes of Vitina and Ruiz, and these instructions will go for any of your central midfielders going forward. I don't think there's many changes to it, but they'll also have the same set of instructions, obviously just on the one on the left and the other one on the right. So both of them will be a bit more box-to-box. This allows them to drop a bit deeper, collect the ball off of the back line or off of the goalkeeper if needed, and then progress it forward. Or potentially they can look to be a bit more involved in the attacking third, looking to get shots off for themselves or potentially create for their teammates. Staying on the edge of the box is essential, looking to try and rotate and facilitate the possession a bit better. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on. They are very physical and aggressive, trying to win that ball back when they lose it, or potentially looking to try and force a error from the opposition's backline or maybe even the goalkeeper, depending on how physical and aggressive they are trying to be. One thing I did note was the cover the wing is essential, looking to try and take up those wider regions, and that's why Ugarte is set to stay central, because more or less your number 8s will look to try and track those open spaces if your fullbacks have gotten too far forward and they haven't made it back in time. The positioning freedom though is set to drift wide, and this is why I said earlier with the team width being set to so wide, I think it was a 90, could be 85, could be 90, I was playing around with it to be honest. But you want to try and get as many players into those wider regions to try and, build up those little triangle patterns of play and try and suck the opposition out and create a bit more space in the central areas of the field. So more or less that's what you are trying to do with the positioning freedom on the offensive side of things being set to drift wide. As you can see for the likes of Ruiz, he's got the same set of instructions just like Vitina and just like any other central midfielder that you look to try and play in this formation. So moving on to the right hand side now, of course starting off with Dembele, who recently scored his first goal for PSG. It's taken like goddamn 20 games, but he's finally got it. He scored it last night to be more precise. But for his defensive support, I have him set to come back on defense, often looking to try and help and track back at times with his fullbacks. And then in terms of the chance creation, a balanced width does best replicate what he's trying to do. Sometimes he will look to cut inside a bit more, create shot opportunities for himself. Other times looking to hold a bit more of the width, and this is where the likes of Hakimi's balanced attacking run support does help, because he can look to invert when Dembele looks to stay wide, and he can look to overlap when Dembele looks to try and come inside and be a bit more involved in the play. His support runs, of course, Dembele is quite quick. He will look to always try and exploit the opposition's backline with those runs in behind. And then his interceptions is set to aggressive, as well as his support on crosses. You want him consistently making those attacking runs into that final third, attacking those potential cutbacks or whipped in crosses at the back post, or maybe even the front post, depending on how you're playing. Onto the likes of Kolo Muani, and this does change for the likes of Gonçalo Ramos, of course. Slightly different players, they offer different attributes to the game and to the systems that they do play in. But we'll go with Kolo Muani for now. He's set to having a balanced width as well as a mixed attack. So he can look to hold up the play, be a bit more of a target man, but he's obviously not really that way inclined. So he will look to more times not make those runs in behind, trying to stretch the opposition. And for the support runs being set to balanced, he will look to drift into those wider regions, and that obviously will open up a bit more space for the likes of Mbappe, and sometimes the likes of Dembele taking up a bit more of a central role going forward. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on, looking to do a bit more of the defensive work, trying to force the opposition into the mistakes going forward. And then for his defensive support, I have set it to a basic defensive support. You don't really need him consistently tracking back, and you don't really need him consistently staying forward, because again, it will more or less try and fit in with the likes of what Mbappe is trying to do more times than not. And then speaking of Kylian Mbappe, he's set to stay forward and have a free roam approach for his chance creation. So he will look to take up that left hand side flank, try and draw the opposition into those wide areas, but at the same time, if the likes of Kolo Muani does drift into that left channel, the likes of Kylian Mbappe can look to more or less take up a bit more of a central role and make those runs in behind, which he will tend to do more times than not. Of course, he's got a few badges that do tend to help him with his attributes going forward. But I think it doesn't really need to be said that you need Mbappe making those runs in behind if you want to score goals with him. His interceptions is set to normal. You could even go with a conservative approach, but I like normal. It does give him a bit more of a defensive edge going forward. And then his support on crosses, obviously you want him in that attacking third, attacking the crosses, attacking the cutbacks, making sure he's scoring the goals. And if you do rotate the team and the likes of Nuno Mendes comes in, as well as Gonçalo Ramos, they do have slightly differing and altering roles for their positions going forward. The Mendes role will be more or less reflected in the Hakimi role, because they will have the same job going forward, looking to try and create the width down either flank, potentially making those overlapping or those underlapping runs at times. So join the attack as well as mixed run type is essential, sometimes looking to create that dynamic left flank approach as well. And then the defensive positioning is set to step up. Now, Mbappe in this situation, he will be slightly changed, and you will probably need him to be set to come back or have a basic defensive support at least, because if you do have a fullback who's consistently looking to be a bit more aggressive, stepping up, you more or less do need your winger to be a bit more competent on the defensive side of things and look to track back every now and then at least. And then moving on to the striker, the only change I have made for Gonçalo Ramos is the fact that he will be an out-and-out target man. Of course, looking to make those runs in behind every now and then, and with the tactical approach being set to forward runs, he will look to do that. But again, a more effective target man, the ability to back into the opposition, be a bit more physical with them, link up more effectively than what Kolo Muani can offer. It just offers a nice dynamic approach for your front line when you do make those rotational plays. So guys, PSG look to try and revert into a 4-4-2 formation later on in games if they are trying to see out a game or a lead or something like that. But what this does is it makes them also very, very dangerous. They look to try and soak up as much pressure in that 4-4-2 formation, and then they'll look to try and hit on the break. Of course, electrifying pace and talent going forward with the likes of Dembele, of course Mbappe, and the likes of Kolo Muani more times than not will be in this structure and this formation because, of course, the pace compared to the likes of Gonçalo Ramos. So basically, I have made a 4-4-2 formation, but I have essentially dropped Kolo Muani slightly deeper, making him into a centre forward, as well as I've brought the likes of Vitina slightly more inward, of course, still taking up that left midfield role, but again, more central, therefore he can be a bit more of a defensive body in the way of the opposition. Like I say, this formation here is set to try and soak up as much pressure as possible, trying to break down the gaps between the lines. Now they won't look to be, as widespread. They'll look to try and be as compact as can be, looking to try and turn the ball over and then turn it into a transition attack. As for the formation right here, as you can see, 1 goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs, 2 full-backs, 2 DMs, 2 wide midfielders, with the one being slightly more narrow, as well as your full-backs, they will also be slightly more narrow. You've got 1 centre-forward and then, of course, 1 striker. So for the tactical vision, it's still set to wing play. Of course, you are going to try and follow the same tactical approach throughout the course of this. The defensive style, however, has changed. It's pressing after loss of possession, looking to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more intuitive with trying to win that ball back, especially with the fact that you will be looking to try and soak up pressure. So any stray passes between the lines, they will be intercepted by your players, and you will look to try and counter and transition more effectively. The team width this time is not as widespread as what it was for the balanced approach. It's a lot more compact, looking to try and stifle and intercept as many through passes as can be. The depth, however, as well, it's also dropped off slightly into a mid-block this time, creating that 2 banks of 4, a very structured and rigid approach, looking to try and be very hard to break down for the opposition. On the offensive side of things, the build-up player is set to fast build-up. Of course, you are looking to try and counter-attack and use the talents of what you do possess in your front line with their pace and spacing abilities. And then, of course, the chance creation is still set to forward runs, looking to try and get those players in behind. The width is slightly more narrow this time, but still widespread nonetheless, set to 80. And then the players in the box, again, slightly more dropped off, set to 6 this time, so it will only more or less be that original front 3 of the likes of Mbappe, Kolo Muani, as well as Dembele. Especially with the instructions going forward, you'll see why I've name-marked those 3 specific players. And then finally, for the corners and free kicks, not set to 4 this time, it's set to 3. Obviously, you want to have a bit more of a defensive presence at the back, so you don't want to overcommit to too many players. That's why I've set it to 3. So moving on to the instructions, and we'll start off with the goalkeeper, Donnarumma. He's got the same set of instructions as the balanced approach, as well as the likes of Marquinhos and Kimpembe. Balanced approach for both of them. Now, the first real change does occur with our fullbacks. Of course, slightly differing roles for the left and the right-hand side. We'll start off with Lucas Hernandez. He's set to stay back while attacking as well as invert. So almost taking up a bit more of a central role, looking to try and, make sure that he's nice and tucked in on that left-hand side, making it very hard for the opposition to try and break down or try and get anything to go down the left-hand flank, or the right-hand flank for them, the left-hand flank for you. And then his defensive positioning, because he's not going to, want to get forward as much, he's going to be told to stay back. You can afford for him to be a bit more aggressive and imposing on the opposition's front line. Moving on to the right back now, of course, Hakimi, slightly differing role, like I said. His attacking runs, he will look to sometimes get forward. It depends on how much of the ball you do have, but when you do have a bit more of the ball with this formation, these tactics set to be on, obviously, he will look to venture forward and look to try and support the attack from time to time. His run type is still set to mixed, and then, of course, his defensive positioning is still set to step up. Into the midfield now, the likes of Ugarte as well as Ruiz have the same set of instructions: cut passing and stay back while attacking, aggressive interceptions, stick to position, and then of course cover the center, looking to hold that front line, make a shield in front of the back line, make sure it's very hard for the opposition to try and play any balls through the central areas of the pitch. As you can see for the likes of Ruiz, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Moving out wide to the left mid, Vitina, he can definitely play this position. Of course, we have narrowed it, and with the instructions going forward, he will be very, very narrow and compact in the central areas of the park, looking to try and break up the opposition's offense going forward as well. So for his defensive support, he is set to come back on defense. Chance creation is set to cut inside, as well as his support runs is set to come short. So he will have a wider role that will be told you need to be a bit more central at times. His interceptions are still set to aggressive, just like the other 2 midfielders we have, as well as his support on crosses, not looking to venture too far forward. He'll look to try and stay on the edge of the area and try and facilitate for the others. Out to Dembele now, the right midfielder, and of course this could be Bricalo, could be Asensio. They will more or less look to have the same roles regardless, right? So the defensive support is set to basic, so sometimes looking to track back when needed. Both the likes of Dembele and Kolo Muani will have a bit more of a rigid structural approach to them, whereas not Dembele, sorry, the likes of Mbappe will have a bit more of a freer, more attacking outlet type role. But his chance creation is set to having a balanced width, so again, looking to sometimes hold the left hand or the right hand channel, other times looking to cut inside and be a bit more link up friendly with the front two. Getting in behind though is essential. Of course, you are looking to try and spring the counter attacks going forward, so it is essential for him to use his pace and get in behind. Normal interceptions are set to be on for him, as well as getting into the box. Now, when I mentioned the players in the box is set to 6, which is essentially just going to be your front 3, it's going to be the likes of Kolo Muani, Mbappe, as well as Dembele. Getting into the box is essential, and the likes of Vitina, we have set him to stay on the edge of the area, so it will always be those players getting into the attacking third. As for the likes of Kolo Muani, the centre forward, of course, he is set to stay central this time, so not having as much of a fluid mixed attack. Yes, he can, of course, but more times he's not looking to try and take up those central areas, try and link up more effectively with the likes of your other attackers. Getting in behind though, using his pace is essential. Normal interceptions this time are set to be on for him, as well as coming back on defense. Of course, because he is slightly higher up, he doesn't always look to drop super deep, but he can look to try and, bet himself into the midfield, add another defensive layer to it, and then potentially look to try and win the ball back and then progress it forward. And then finally, we've got the likes of Kylian Mbappe. His support runs are set to having a balanced approach, so he can look to drift into either the left-hand channel or potentially the central areas and try and take up the striker role. Getting in behind though is essential, as well as his interceptions is set to conservative. Now, everybody else will be working extremely hard, whereas Mbappe will be told you need to conserve your energy and wait for the attacking chance to present itself, which more times than not with this team, with this structure, it does a very good job at doing that. As for the defensive support, he is going to be the outlet ball going forward, and a very dangerous one, because essentially you're trying to soak up as much pressure, and when the opposition tries to do this, they will obviously look to try and add players into the attack. And when you do that, you become very light at the back. So Kylian Mbappe taking on 1 or 2 defenders is light work for him on any given day, especially in EAFC 24. So yes, my people, that is my version of the 4-3-3, as well as the defensive 4-4-2 formation for obviously PSG under the likes of Luis Enrique. Of course, guys, if you have enjoyed this, please hit that like button down below. If you haven't yet, hit that sub button. Like I say, 3K by the end of the year. Please, you would absolutely make my day if you could subscribe to the channel. We have got some fantastic career mode videos coming out this weekend. Some very good stuff happens in these upcoming episodes. But nonetheless, I won't, spoil it. You guys will have to watch it yourselves. It will be out later, so please make sure you have subscribed, you have liked the video, and of course, I hope you guys have a damn great day. I'm out!